First up this evening, Bully, I'm going to bounce it up in the centre square for your good self, mate, for the tap off for AFL. What are we, 2-6, I believe, this year? 1 year off, it's throwing me a little bit, but, mate, square me up. What's going on?
Well, released, it was a pretty quick turnaround because it only got sort of announced about a month ago. For those that aren't aware, AFL is the national sport in Australia. It's played around the country, the biggest sport in the country. Don't tell the NRL people that, they'll get upset. But it's, and probably just for those that don't know anything about it, it's a bit of a combination of, I don't know, soccer, NFL to some degree, and it's various concoctions of different sports. So,
as I understand it, Bully, it's the toughest sport on the planet because we hit each other full force and there's zero padding. Is that right?
Zero padding. It's funny you mentioned that because I've watched a few clips on YouTube, etc., that have people from other countries watching some of the AFL marks and tackles and crashes and all the rest of it, and they wince and go, how do you do that? That's phenomenal. But as you mentioned, no pads. So, yeah, as I said, quick turnaround. It was only about a month ago that they announced that it was coming out. It dropped a week and a half ago. So I put a little bit of time into it. I was hesitant, always excited to see an AFL game because we don't get a lot of them, but really hesitant because I'm not sure if you remember back, AFL 23, which released a couple of years ago, on release was missing half the features that were promised. It was buggy. It was an absolute mess of a game to start with. To Big Ant's credit, who are the developers, they did put a lot of work and time and effort into it. And
shout out their Melbourne developers.
That's right. And they actually did get into a pretty good position after about 6 or 8 months that it was playable. It was a decent game in the end. So a bit of trepidation, but I still went out and got it day one. It's AFL game, as you said, an Aussie developer and producer, so you got to support the local lads. And pleasantly surprised, I have to say. There's a couple of little finicky sort of things that take a bit of getting used to, but for anyone that's seen AFL, it's to wrap up the complexities, and because it's not just, most games it's just forward, whereas you play rugby, it's just going forward. It's soccer, it's going forward. Basketball, going forward. NFL, etc., etc. This sort of goes forwards, backwards, sideways, the whole gamut. Kicking, handballing. So to actually put it together into a game that is, basically in a playable state, I think any time they do that is quite an achievement. It's very similar in terms of the presentation to AFL 23. You're not going to boot it up and expect NBA 2K or MLB The Show or anything like that. It's not at that level. And I don't think anybody that's got out and wanted to look at this and play it is expecting anything at that sort of level. They just want it. And the reality is the audience isn't there in Australia, that you're not going to sell millions and millions of copies like you would the MLB The Show, etc. A couple of 100,000 copies is probably where you're at. Although I did notice it sold out in a few stores in Australia, much like AFL 23 did. It was hard to come by unless you'd sort of pre-ordered it. So hopefully they're doing pretty well. In terms of the gameplay itself, as I said, going into it with a bit of hesitation, it actually plays pretty well. Graphically, it looks, it's not the lifelike images you'd expect from a top shelf sports game, but they're pretty good. You can tell who you're looking at. It's got the actual commentators that commentate the AFL game on TV. They've got a handful of those in there. The presentation is pretty good for what it is. The gameplay itself is pretty good. You've got everything in there that you sort of want in terms of being able to take big marks and tackles and goals and all the rest of it. So I reckon overall, pretty impressed that they've got it out. And I've noticed pretty much every day since it's been released, or every second day, they've been working on patches and updating things. And so very similar to AFL 23 in that sort of perspective, that they're not sort of resting on it and saying, oh, okay, we'll see how it goes over a month and then we might tighten some things up. They're working on it basically on a daily basis to update things and make sure that it's running smoothly. So given the fact that we're not starting in as big a hole as we were with AFL 23, and it's just sort of tweaking things here and there, really excited to see where it can get to in another month or two. It's, as I said, in an entirely playable state. It's really quite fun to play at the moment, and just those little tweaks and stuff over the journey, I think will tighten it up and make it a really good experience.
First question I've got for you, Bully. Are you playing it on PS5, I assume?
Yeah, PS5, yep.
And how's it rocking on the Pro? Fast load times? How's that DualSense controller?
Yeah, you got a bit of a rumble in there. You don't really use the triggers in the game as such, other than to sort of turbo run or whatever you want to call it, boost. But
I would have assumed a Specky was L2 R2 and pull it in and have the tension going. No.
Oh well, it's L2 plus the mark button, but it's kind of funny. That's one of the things that I've sort of struggled with. It's actually when the ball's coming in, the way that the players sort of set themselves up automatically, it makes it very difficult to actually do a specky and jump onto the shoulders of someone, because you're not getting that run up. You're sort of both sort of tussling it where the ball drop's going to be. So you don't really get that so much. Most of the game plays off the face buttons and the stick, but load time's pretty reasonable, I think, in terms of, you know, going from the menu into the pre-game sort of stuff itself. It's maybe 5 to 10 seconds depending on you know, where you're at, and in between quarters, and then there's pretty much it's got a bit of a rundown with the stats and sort of stuff in between quarters and at half time, and then the end of a game, maybe same thing again. It's 5 or 10 seconds, and then you're back at the main screen and ready to go again. So overall, pretty good package, pretty good experience, I think.
Are they taking use of the speaker in the DualSense controller at all? Maybe the ref's whistle, to my mind, would be the perfect thing to be coming out of there.
I don't think so. I haven't noticed it, which probably means that it's not there. But maybe that's something they're looking at implementing down the track. But I don't know. I assume you haven't gone hands on with it. I don't know if you've got any interest in it at all, Troy.
No, I spend a lot of my time playing baseball when I can. So, no, I'm not the world's biggest AFL fan. Obviously, I played it growing up as a kid, and I covered it for, 15 years in broadcast media side of it. So it's a bit hard to separate myself from the TV production. But do you know, were you able to talk the whale into picking up a copy? And if so, have you guys played any multiplayer? How's that looking?
I haven't played any multiplayer, and I did, because he asked me. I went out and picked it up the morning that it came out, and loaded it up and had a couple of games before I had to tootle off to work. And he did message me and say, "Oh, you know, is it that much of an improvement? Is it worth it?" And I think my response was along the lines of, "It doesn't matter whether I say it's a steaming pile or whether it's the best game ever made. You're going to go out and buy it anyway." So, and sure enough, I checked later in the day, and he's obviously bought it digitally, loaded it up, and played it. So
good on you, Unky. I love the spirit. I look forward to hearing in a future episode of GEA how that multiplayer is. Bully, have you eyeballed the trophy list? How's that looking? Achievable platinum?
I think it will be. It's just a bit, as with most sports games, there's a bit of a time sinking, because you've got to play through a season. You've got to do various different things. There is a couple in there that on face value, you sort of look at it and you think, oh, that's not too bad. But I reckon it would be one of those ones that there's 2 or 3 trophies that if you were playing online with a friend, that you could sort of set it up.
Yep.
Like one, for instance, is you need to take 5 speckies in a match, which, as I said, it's hard to do in normal
against the
AI. Yeah, but if you're playing with someone, that you could sort of set it up. The other one is that you have to run 50 meters without being tackled, which again, the way the AI is set up, you can't. There's always going to be someone coming towards you, so it's very difficult to sort of do that. Whereas if you're playing with someone who just took control of the nearest defender and move them out of your way, and then when the next one came along, they move out of the way, etc.
Moses style, part the Red Sea and just let you run up the guts, eh?
Yeah, pretty much. So I reckon it is pretty achievable, I would have thought. Apart from those little ones that you might need a little bit of help with, but it's probably something I'll work towards. I think I've sort of jumped into it 2 or 3 times over the last. In the last week, so I've probably got 3 or 4 sessions and played 2 or 3 games each session, and it'll be just one of those ones that you just tick away in the background and make slow progress on over a couple of weeks or a couple of months.
Nice one, mate. Final couple of questions from my side. First one is there a my player, my career style thing? Can you start a bloke in the VFL and work your way up, or?
There is a my career type thing. I don't know where it starts, whether you go straight into the AFL or whether you start in the lower leagues or whatever. But there's the pro team, which is very much like the Madden.
It's just the Cats, is it?
Yeah, you just play as Geelong, and that's the ultimate team.
Yeah, perfect, yeah.
But that's basically
Go
like
Cats!
your Madden Ultimate Team or your whatever they have in FC,
Yeah.
whatever version they're up to, where you get the cards or you put your team together and do it that way. They've got a management mode which is actually quite in depth. So in terms of that's what I'm playing through at the moment is the management mode. So it's got the AFL, which is the men's. It's got the AFLW, which is the women's. Then it's got both competitions under that, and then it's got the junior competitions under that as well. So there's 6 teams that theoretically, I've just simmed all the lower level ones and just played that with the men's competition. But theoretically, you could play with the juniors up to the reserves or the B League, and then into the AFL. It's got training schedules that you have to do. It's got your travel schedules. So are you going to go into a cheap hotel and save your club money, or are you going to spend more and it helps the players out because they're more relaxed and they recover better,
right.
that sort of stuff. So there is actually a little bit into it, other than just sort of let's just play the next game and sort of move along. So they've included more into each of the modes, which is good to see. Plus, there's the online mode as well. So
Yep.
we'll see where we go with that. I don't know. I only played a couple of games with AFL 23 online, and it was one of those things. I think there was a bit of a hack where you could break a tackle, which made it virtually impossible to. If someone knew how to do that, it basically made it impossible to tackle them. So they could just run from one end of the ground to the other and kick a goal. You couldn't stop them.
Yeah, right.
And so you'd either play against players that knew how to do that, which didn't make it any fun at all, or if you tried to play it properly and you found someone that was actually trying to do it properly, anytime you started winning by a couple of goals, they just rage quit on you and you just sort of left there going, oh, okay. So interesting to see how it goes. As I said, I haven't played online yet, but it'll be interesting to see because, again, it's not there's not a massive audience for the game. So therefore, there's a diminished online pool. So you probably, if you're looking at that, you'd probably want to get some friends that you're teeing it up with rather than playing with some random that you don't know how or what they're going to do online. But yeah,
I guess a fair multiplayer tip, I'm assuming, this is pure speculation, but I would suspect that Friday night and Saturday night, directly after an AFL game, if you jumped into it and looked for a multiplayer game, that'd be the shortest amount of wait time you'd have the whole week. I think it'd be relatively common for gamers out there to watch the game on the Friday, Saturday night and then roll straight into a game themselves.
Yeah, quite possibly, or maybe even midway through the game, if you can see one team copying a shellacking, you might decide I've seen enough from that, and I'll try and change the outcome on AFL 26.
Fair enough. That brings me to my final question, mate. Do they have the live rosters and week by week games? Can you play the current week's Cats team against the current opponents at the correct ground, all that sort of stuff?
So the schedule's correct in that, like the fixture for the year is correct in who you're playing and what day you're playing and the stadiums you're playing at. The
live roster updates, ins and outs.
Yeah, so that's not there, but it does have. You can just bring players in or drop them as you see fit. You can pick your own team. When you're playing through the management mode, though, it does have injuries, which that's probably the one annoyance I've found with it is you basically, I reckon every game you play, 2 or 3 of your players get injured to some degree in every single game you play.
Mm-hmm.
So you're constantly having to take them out. They'll miss a couple of weeks. You're having to replace them. So it's probably, as much as players do get injuries in real life, it's probably just a bit over the top in how many you're getting in each game, and then therefore how many substitutions you have to make, and then how many of those players are missing the following game or couple of games after that, which can be a bit annoying. But again, hopefully that's something they sort of tighten up. But having said that, you can turn the injuries off as one of the settings anyway, so you can just sort of say, well, I don't want to do that and get rid of it.
Fair enough. Perfect. I know you're only a little way into it, and I know you're loath to do it, but I'd love for you to slap a score on it, and then we'll move on into game 2.
Oh, and take this with a grain of salt, because I'm taking this from the view of an AFL game, and it's not comparative to the top tier sports game. But
and that makes perfect sense.
But from what they presented for AFL, I would give it a solid 8 at the moment. And there is room for improvement, no doubt. But as I said, plays really well. It's good fun to play. There's not the massive bugs that you had in the previous offering. So if you're a fan of the AFL, it's probably not a bad one to jump into.
donkey.
Okie dokie.